Welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 4. I'm Bob Judson. I'm the host for this podcast, and thank you very, very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're a new joiner or a seasoned listener, then I really hope you enjoy the mix of content that we provide. The personal stories, the thematic episodes, and of course the fantastic guest interviews. If you've been with me since the beginning, then I'm enormously grateful for your loyalty and thank you so much. If you're relatively new to the show, then I really hope you like it and I hope you find all of it interesting and some of it hopefully useful to you. Please subscribe on whichever channel it is you're using, whether it's YouTube, whether it's a podcast platform. That really helps us boost the show and get it over the hills on the algorithms. So if you can do that for me, I would be enormously grateful. But without further ado, let's go. Hi everyone. Once again, I find myself recording a podcast from the delightful setting that is Deloitte University, just as I've completed a course and I'm about to head back home. And there's a topic that was brought up by one of my participants actually this week, which I thought was worthy of a conversation, a short thematic episode, because I won't make it too long this week, which was all about managing emotions in the leadership context and how you do that, how you regulate your emotions, how you think about what you need to do as a leader. And I think it's a really relevant question because we all have emotions and some people are a bit more emotional than others. Some people are too emotional in some circumstances and too much heart on sleeve. Some people are too emotionless and look harsh, look dehumanized as a result. So it's a great question because at the end of the day, I think it matters to the people you're leading. If you're showing enough emotion to show you care, if you're not showing too much emotion, because I think that doesn't necessarily help your overall appearance as a leader. But it's also important to think about not just what you show, but actually how you physically manage that for yourself and what it's doing to you as an individual in terms of managing your emotional output and your internal monologue that's going on associated with that. I think it's fair to say that everybody has a personal life and a professional life, if they were in work. And those two things you want to try and keep in balance. I've talked about that separately and previously, and I think that's really important. I think it's also fair to say that they won't always be in balance, and you're going to have that challenge periodically, and you know, trying to keep one pulling the other one back in is important. So having your professional life pulling your personal life back if it's a bit difficult for whatever particular reason, or indeed your personal life pulling your professional life back if that's difficult for whatever reason. It gets really difficult if both of them are actually falling below the level you want them at and at the same time, and actually regulating that can be pretty hard. But I think there's a number of dynamics in play here. I think there's what's caused the emotional event for you, whether it's something that's happened to you, whether it's happened to something your family and your kind of close, your personal side of your relationship, or it's a professional thing and that's causing you some kind of emotional disturbance. And that emotion can be all sorts of different things. It can be sadness, it can be happiness, obviously, it can be concern, it can be anger, it can be frustration, lots, you name it. There's all sorts of different emotions that come into play. And I think if you're being authentic as a leader, obviously you don't want to turn around and completely disguise your emotional output. If something has happened that is an event that is obviously traumatic, upsetting, frustrating, annoying, should be no real need for you to disguise that completely, but you might want to regulate your output just a little bit so you're not really venting your frustration or your anger, or indeed bursting into tears necessarily while you're briefing your team is usually, trying to avoid that is a good thing, because I think you need to be a bit more measured than that if you can. But people will also get it if you can't. If it's something so personal, so damaging, so difficult, then be transparent about it. Be obviously clear that this has happened and it makes you look human. And I think people will expect you to look human. I certainly think, though, if we compartmentalize this into various elements and let's deal with them separately, the frustration, anger, annoyance side of emotional output is one area where whatever has caused that, you need to think about how do I manage that in my outward appearance in the work environment. And if it's a personal issue that's caused it and it's something that's preying on your mind, I certainly think you should, my view, others may disagree, you should attempt to bury that a little bit and compartmentalize that a little bit from influencing your work, because actually if it's got nothing to do with work, then actually it's better off kept compartmentalized and away from that. And indeed, work may or may not provide a welcome distraction from it and allow you the opportunity to be clear of that for a little bit and then have to deal with it at a subsequent point. If it's more on the upset, frustration, emotional side, where it's causing you emotional anxiety in some way, shape, or form, that may be harder to do and harder to compartmentalize, harder to separate yourself completely from that. Some people are quite good at it, some people are less good at it. You need to kind of know which type you are in that space, I think. If you're very good at regulating it, very good at controlling and compartmentalizing, you may well be able to manage yourself without any further kind of input from anyone else. But if you're not, then actually having people you trust, having people you respect, who you can confide in, who can support you, who can build you some space to function while you kind of get your head back in the game and get to the right place you need to be, then that's a really good thing. You can then decide what, if anything, those individuals actually tell the wider team. That may be anything from nothing to quite a lot, depending on what your personal feeling is on the matter and how sensitive and so on it actually is. But the one thing that's really important is to do something. I think you can't disguise this completely. You need to be clear with the people that work around you that there is an issue. They will see it. Even if you don't think they're going to see it, they're probably going to see it. They're going to see it at the very least that you, the leader of the organization, in whatever form that is, however big the team is, they're going to see you as in some way not yourself. And they're going to worry about that. They're going to want to be able to help, because that's human nature. They wanted to see whether they can do anything. They may turn around and just try and avoid you a little bit. And that's, you so often see that if you think about people who've had bereavements. There are people who actually can confront that head on and talk to people and actually get a view from them, and talk to them about that bereavement in a very helpful, emotionally savvy, empathetic way. There are other people who are terrified of doing that, and they find it very, very difficult to talk about it. People with serious life-threatening diseases, exactly the same thing. How do I broach this subject? How can I possibly bring this up with an individual? So you have to be prepared for all of those kind of eventualities, I think, and think through how do I want my persona to come over in the workplace and indeed outside the workplace, in terms of the event that I'm currently facing. What kind of inputs do I want from other people, which can vary from none to lots. You might want lots of people turning around and talking to you and offering you help. You may actually want absolutely nothing to do with that. If you're the latter and you don't want anything to do with that, then make sure you put yourself in a position where you're keeping yourself away from it, so you're not faced with those kind of problems and you're having to try and deal with them, because it's just difficult. It just compounds the issue. Certainly, looping back to the anger, frustration, annoyance thing, make sure that your behavior in those circumstances doesn't start adversely impinging on those around you. And you've got to keep in mind, it's not their fault. It's not something they did. It's not something they should be in any way feeling that, what have I done? Why are you suddenly having a go at me for something that actually I don't even know what the issue is here? But you're clearly upset, annoyed, frustrated. Probably most of us have seen examples of that, where people are, will just have a go at you for no apparent reason. And I think that's the other way of looking at this, which is an important consideration from a leadership point of view as well, is it's not just about you. Some of the time it may well be that you're looking at members of your team and people that work around you that may be above you actually, who are not themselves for whatever reason. You need to be working hard to try and understand what the issue is there, bearing in mind that it may be something deeply personal, maybe something they don't want to talk about, maybe something that actually is urgent or really difficult to deal with. And it may be nothing whatsoever to do with work. It's very unlikely that somebody's performance just drops off dramatically or their emotional state changes dramatically without something being behind that. Now, if it's a work-related issue, getting to the bottom of that is probably a priority, and understanding that. If it's a personal issue, you have to handle it more delicately, of course. I think being supportive, being understanding, being empathetic, being sympathetic, all those kind of things matter. Offering support and waiting to see whether it's accepted and taken up, but don't be too pushy about it. You need to be clear about you're there to help if you're wanted to help, but don't feel it's your job to help and you must be allowed to help, because at the end of the day that can be quite alienating for whoever it is that's actually facing the problem, because they can feel you're pushing a bit too far and a bit too hard and in a space that isn't yours to go. So I think all of these things are in play. I think the most challenging one for me, when I look back through my own career, is your own emotional state, though. It is definitely where you are troubled by something which is a challenge. And I mean, I've talked about that previously in my personal stories journey about, when my wife and I lost our twin daughters, and the aftermath of that was obviously pretty dramatic. And I handled it poorly. I handled it poorly at home, I think. I handled it poorly at work. And I should have been more open, more I guess transparent in the work environment, particularly about some aspects of that, because I know that people would have wanted to help and be supportive, and I certainly know that I could have and should have been even more supportive. I think I was pretty supportive, but I should have been even more supportive to my wife, and I probably, when I look at it back, I was pretty closed, really, to be honest. I did not handle some of that very well. And I think, again, you only learn from these kind of events some of the time by them happening to you. And it's important you do learn from those and you reflect on, how did I handle this? Did I handle it well? Did I handle it really poorly? What can I take from it? What are my learning points? What am I turning around and thinking I should do differently next time? Because the one thing that you can guarantee is there will be some kind of next time. It may not be the same thing. Hopefully it's not going to be the same thing, but it may well be a similar thing. And you need to have taken whatever you can from the previous events, added that together, and come up with something that looks like a kind of sensible way forward based on your previous experience that you're now leveraging in the treatment of the way you're handling your current issue. And the more that these things happen to you, sadly, the better off you'll probably be in terms of getting on and regulating your emotions. I think some people, and I would count myself in this number, are quite closed and probably look a bit closed to people, where they feel that actually you should be more upset by this, you should more visibly be upset by this, you should be more visibly annoyed by this, whatever it happens to be. And that emotional game, different people are different, so they're going to look at you and they will judge you to a degree based on their expectations of your reaction to a particular event. Either that you were too emotional, you weren't emotional enough, whatever it happens to be, you can expect those judgments to be in play. So I think it's important to think about that and to be conscious that regulating your emotions in one way, shape, or form is really, really important. Seeking advice, seeking some help, maybe even seeking some professional help, depending on the issue that's actually at hand here. All of those things play into what you do. Don't turn around and disguise this stuff from your more senior leadership either. If you're being really troubled by something and something is affecting your work performance, you need to be clear about that. You don't want to leave any doubt here that someone actually thinks that you've just gone off the rails and lost your mojo in terms of what you're doing at work, and it starts to cause further problems for you professionally. You need enough transparency in there that it's going to be clear enough to work, that they need to buy you some space and give you some help. And I mean, any sensible employer is definitely going to do that. If you've been there for a while, particularly, they're going to know that they know what your normal state is and your normal performance is. So that's an important feature. But I think the bottom line is, don't forget there's a toll. I mean, the old expression, the body keeps a score, is relevant here. I think if you bury too much stuff for too long, and particularly where it's traumatic type stuff, then the reality is probably it's coming back to haunt you at some point. And there's a score to be settled, and you're going to have to be dealing with that at some point. So it's really important that you don't excessively lock yourself away from showing and unleashing, I suppose, your emotions in the right kind of way. Just try and make sure that if you are going to have some major upset moment or a major rant moment because of something, that you're targeting the people that are actually going to understand why that's happening, and I hopefully prepare them a little bit in advance for for that, so they at least know that it's not them, it's not something they've done, it's not about their performance, the etc. etc. It's about X, Y, or Z, whatever it happens to be that's causing that. Because that for me is the most important thing to think about in the damage space here. You can inadvertently, as a leader, create quite a lot of damage by not thinking through how you're going to regulate your emotions. If you go to work annoyed, upset, frustrated, angry, or any combination of those emotional states, and you allow that to create a situation where you are angry, frustrated, emotional in some way with the team that work with you, for you, around you, then they may not forgive you easily for that. At the end of the day, if it's not their fault and it's nothing to do with them, why were you having a go at them? Why were you having a real downer? You should be a bit more thoughtful about the impact you're going to have in that space. And if you can't do that, if you're unable to really control and regulate in a sensible way, you need to think about other coping strategies, and that's where other people come into play, and potentially you're off sick for the day, so you're actually managing it, whatever it happens to be, that is going to allow you the space to come back stronger, come back fighting fit, ready to actually do your mainstream job. So I guess what I'm saying in probably a bit of a rambling way for this is one of those things where it's a really multifaceted issue. You cannot really predict how you're going to handle all sorts of different issues in your life until you have to handle them. And you will learn by doing, in that sense, when stuff happens that is going to force you into a place where you have to think about stuff a little bit differently. And that's perfectly okay. That's very natural. Everyone's been there before. Lots and lots of people will have some level of knowledge of what you're going through, and you can get some help from those people and take the opportunity to do exactly that, because it's really, really important. Just try and make sure that you are not damaging yourself or damaging others or reputationally damaging yourself or putting yourself in a position where you are likely to really fall apart under the pressure. If you're about to turn to and make a big speech to a conference and some dramatic event has really, really, really upset you, you probably can't compartmentalize that completely. And the risk you run is that actually midway through somewhere, something goes horribly wrong and actually it all falls apart on you. You don't want to do that, because in that instance, it's very unlikely that everyone you're dealing with will actually ever fully understand what it was that went on. And it's just reputationally quite damaging for you. So mitigate that risk. Think about how you are actually going to handle things in a way that is good for you, good for the work environment, good for whoever else you're dealing with at that particular moment in time, in terms of client relationships, etc., etc. And just be human. Be aware that everyone gets emotional. Everyone gets emotional. I mean, there's some people who are more demonstrably emotional, but just because you're really closed and tight in terms of managing your emotions, that does not mean you don't get emotional. It doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It doesn't mean you don't feel hurt and upset and frustrated in exactly the same way as someone who's much more overt about their emotions. The difference is you're just not showing it as much. And again, obvious point, but look at your people from that same lens. If you think about someone who is actually really, really bad at revealing their emotions and is very closed about it, but that something really difficult has happened or is happening to them, then that's bound to be having an impact on them. And the Liz McConaughey, when she did the podcast interview with me, said, if you're asking people, how are you feeling, then ask them, how are you feeling twice? Because the second time, you're actually likely to get a more honest answer. Because the first time, it's just a protective shield going up, particularly to people who are suffering from PTSD or any other kind of traumatic event management. They'll put a protective shield that says, fine, no problem. And actually, the second time you ask the question, you may well start to crack that veneer a little bit and get underneath that and get into the problem and have a chance to actually deal with it. So thinking about that for yourself as well as for the people that work for you is where I'm coming from. I said I'll keep it short. I hope it's not too much of a ramble. I think it's one of those tricky areas, but really important areas to think about as a leader. You are sooner or later going to be facing quite substantial emotional decisions, emotionally charged conversations, emotional people working for you, around you, in your sphere. And you have to have a solution for how you're going to handle that. And most importantly, you have to know yourself. You have to know how you're going to handle things, how you're going to be affected vicariously by something. If something bad goes on in your organization, can you afford to let it upset you significantly? Or do you actually just need to turn around and show must go on and sort the job out? Because that's a tricky problem, again, for anyone to deal with. So just be mindful. Just be really, really mindful of this is hard. There are no easy answers. I've probably not given any easy answers, or indeed any answers here. I've just thrown some stuff at the wall in terms of my own thoughts around this kind of issue. I hope at least some of it resonates with you. I'll be interested to see if you have any feedback as to any areas you think I might have missed, or that I might have done something or said something in a way that you think is actually counterproductive, and that there's a better way of putting it over, or indeed there's a bigger chunk that I need to be covering slightly differently. If any of those are the case, then I'd be really, really happy to hear from you. So please do let me know. But that's it for this week. Really glad to have had you on the show as ever. Thank you very, very much indeed for listening. Back to normal jogging at home next week. But thanks ever so much. All the very best. Bye-bye. I really hope you've enjoyed this short session on regulating emotions. I try and do these thematic episodes periodically because I think there are some topics here that are very important to leaders, and not only for themselves in terms of their own leadership style, but also for everyone that's working around them and the kind of leadership group they are working with. So if you have enjoyed it, please share it, please follow, please subscribe, please like, please comment, please repost, all those kind of things that help boost the podcast, get it over the algorithms, make sure that people are actually starting to really pay attention to what's going on the show. And if you like it a lot and you find it valuable and you find this sort of stuff is actually genuinely insightful for you, and I really hope at least some of you that's the case, then please think about the financial support side of the podcast. Putting me in a space where you're buying me a cup of coffee a month. That'll be great. That'll be absolutely perfect. I'm not saying you have to contribute. I've not made it a subscriber-based podcast, but I need to think about how I actually get some return on the considerable time that goes into producing these episodes. So if you're able to, go to patreon.com, links in the show notes, links in my website, etc., and actually think about joining as a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. And your support would be enormously valued. So I'd be very, very grateful. Thank you very much indeed. Anyway, for listening or watching. Back next week. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye now.